Thank you for that. There's a couple of things here. I'm in your rec room. That's good. And I'm an economist. You got a dartboard there. I trust the darts are locked up, right? Okay. As long as the darts are locked up, I'm good here. I'm going to talk about a lot of things here, and I'm going to go fast. I'm going to talk about the national and the Iowa economies. The whole idea here is to just get a sense of what's going on in the economy. I have a take on the economy. It's based on data. It's not based on rhetoric. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. I work around all of Iowa. I talk around all of Iowa. I mostly focus on and work with non-metropolitan communities. So working with non-metropolitan communities, I also need to focus on and or highlight the fact that there's quite a bit of difference between how we're doing in our metropolitan areas, like here, versus some of the other parts of the state. So metro and non-metropolitan outcomes I'm going to look at. The third thing there, though, is the most important thing that I've been doing for the last several years, where I look at key social and demographic indicators. I try to help people understand what's going on with their population / labor force / anything else, with some key demographic factors. And then at the end of this, I have some information about the fiscal health of Iowa's larger cities, a little bit of information on public finance. I have in here a piece on the ag economy. I'm going to skip it because I don't think I'm going to have enough time to do that. So if we get to questions and somebody wants to ask me questions about the ag economy, that's fine. I'm a community and regional economist. I'm not an ag economist. I study communities and states exactly as they are performing. I don't study the theory of communities and the theory of states, and I don't study formulas that help me explain these things. So I try to just look at what's going on in the larger economy. So I start out with the national economy. What we have here is the national payroll employment. I'm going to go over to this other side here. I'm going to get across this. National payroll employment continues to expand. The shaded areas here are the recession. That's the Great Recession. It wasn't a pretty good recession. It was a great recession. And you can see that once we bottomed out, the economy has continued to grow at almost a fixed rate over the course of this recovery. This little bit right here, that was when we did the census. We had to hire people. Just wanted to show the impact of government employment right there. So we've had a pretty good rate of growth on our economy over the course of the last 8 years. Real GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. Gross domestic product continues to rise. The word real means I've adjusted it for inflation. So it's real growth in excess of inflation. Again, that rate of growth has been relatively consistent, mostly rising at a relatively good clip over this entire period of time. GDP is composed of yours and my consumption, our purchases, our investment, private investment, the balance of trade, which we hear our president is very worried about right now. The balance of trade happens to be negative, plus the sum of all governmental spending and investment. You put all three of those things together, that becomes our economy. That becomes our economy, and that's what's continuing to rise. It is rising because real consumer expenditures are rising. Again, real adjusted for inflation. You and I are buying goods and services. We are 70-some% of the nation's economy at any given time. That's why we produce goods and services, so that we can use them. And again, that's rising. It's driving the majority of this growth. We're able to consume because, importantly, real household incomes have improved. Now, here's a thing that a lot of people were stuck on for quite a long time. Household incomes actually peaked in 1998 in inflation-adjusted terms. It peaked in 1998. They declined through that early recession, slowly recovered up until right on the cusp of the Great Recession, collapsed, slowly recovered, and just recently are they being posted as having eclipsed the values that we had in 2008, once adjusting for inflation. So this is really good news. This is a good thing to see in the economy. We've been moaning about this for a long, long time. It's nice to see it having had ended, and it has for the time being. That's because real wages have risen. That's money you and I make from working. Again, you can see they rose sharply. Well, this is interesting. They rose sharply during the Great Recession. Why did real wages go up sharply during the Great Recession? There were fewer people working, but people like me didn't get laid off. I make a good salary, right? Who got laid off? People didn't make that much money. So, all the mucky mucks, they got to keep their jobs. And all the hard-working folks, they got laid off. So anyway, the average earnings went up. Okay, so then they go down through the recovery. Slowly they went up. We have this real sharp downturn this last report. New numbers are going to come out on tomorrow. And so we think this is an aberration. We think that these numbers are still climbing, but we'll find out tomorrow whether that is the case. Many more people are working. This is just simply the civilian unemployment rate. Again, rises sharply during the recession. Here it's going down. Oh, you can see where we laid off those census people. Yep, bye, adios, nice to have you. And then it's been going down. So again, the unemployment rate has been going down. The unemployment rate is just a little bit over 4%. Many economists for a period of time were saying, we're going to be at full employment at 5%. Well, no, it's gone down even more. It's in a better position than it was prior to the recession. And now economists are saying, we think this unemployment rate can actually go down even a little bit more, and the economy can continue to expand. The pattern of improvement has continued. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that unemployment rate, that doesn't really describe the nature and the character of the workforce, because there's a lot of people that are underemployed. And this is what this other measure does. It counts the number of people who are unemployed, people who are marginally attached to the workforce, like some of my kids, and it counts involuntary part-timers, people who are working part-time but want to work full-time but can't find full-time work. And again, that number, rose sharply during the recession, has slowly come down, didn't improve very much between 2015 and 2016, but again, has improved of late, and that number also is improving. So this is the more broad measure of unemployment, and it is at or about where it was prior to the recession. So we've had a long period here. It's a decade of adjustment, which actually was the title of a book I wrote 25 years ago. And that was about the 80s. But we've had a decade of adjustment here. We've worked our way back down to a pretty good place overall. I put this graph up because there's a thing that I want to teach people when we think about folks when they go through unemployment and how the economy responds. This is the number, not the rate. This is the number of unemployed people. So that's what the blue line is. This is the number of unemployed people. And you can see it's gone down over time. I just showed you the unemployment rate. It's the same thing. The bottom line, the red line, are job openings. So when we go through a recession, what happens? Well, people aren't hiring. They're out asking for labor. And only slowly do they start asking for more labor. Only slowly. Only slowly. At one point here, early in this recession, the ratio of unemployed to openings was 5 to 1 or greater. And slowly it improves. For every 4 people unemployed, there's one job. For every 3 people unemployed, there's one. You see what's going on. It improves. Now, over the course of us recovering during this recession, many people received unemployment assistance. Typically, if you get unemployment assistance, it's for 6 months. But they extended unemployment assistance for many of the people up to 1 year, and in some of the places up to 2 years. So folks would argue, they would say, people are receiving unemployment assistance, and because they're getting unemployment assistance, they don't want to go back to work. And so they passed rules that constrained some of that unemployment assistance, saying if we get rid of unemployment assistance, they'll go back to work. They can't, there's nothing, this is the jobs that were offered. Whatever you did to the people up there doesn't change this. And yet we do this. And we get frustrated during periods of recessions, during periods of economic downturn. And by the way, of the people, only about a third of the people who are unemployed qualify for unemployment assistance over the course of that. It's just the nature of the kind of work that you do. Not very many people, a smaller fraction of the workforce. Anyway, I always point this out. So you can't do something to these people to make this slope rise faster. You just can't. Right now, where are we? This is a nice tight place right now. This is good. This is kind of where we were prior to the recession. This is good. This is a good place for us to be. Again, these indicators are pretty positive for the state of the national economy. But there's still room for improvement in the labor force. This is the measure of people 25 to 54, and I don't fit in that group, but 25 to 54, it's the that are in the labor force. That are in the labor force. That number has gone down. The fraction, the percentage of these people has gone down and only has started to recover since about mid 2015. There's room for this to improve because we would think that we can at least get back to where we were prior to the recession. So this labor force among this prime group of workers still has room to grow because we need a labor force for the economy to grow. If we don't add more people into the labor force that are already here, we have to get them through immigration. They don't come anywhere else. That's the only way we can get them. So we have to get them through immigration. So incentivizing one way or the other this population to work, to enter into the labor force, and what's going to draw them in? It's going to be the higher wages that we're seeing. The more wages grow in real terms, the likelihood that somebody will make a decision to enter in or stay in the labor force for a longer period of time. So if I go for a summary, overall national outlook, consistent growth at the national level, improved wages mostly, not in Iowa, but mostly. Lower skilled service workers, retail workers in general haven't seen strong increases in their earnings. But people in other kinds of occupations have done pretty well. Hires and quits are up. Hires, willingness to hire people, need to hire people, but quits as well. Me being willing to quit a job because I know I can get a job in another place. During the recession, you didn't quit your job if you had a job. You held on to it. So if I take the rate of hires and the rate of quits, it indicates something about multiply them times each other, divide by 2, whatever I want to do. It indicates a healthy churn in the economy, that the economy is looking for new workers and that people are taking chances and moving around. That's a good part. Consumer sentiment is high. Yours and my willingness to buy things, yours and my confidence about the economy is reasonably high right now. We're buying automobiles, we're buying washing machines, we're buying the big stuff. Inflation is low, persistently low, much lower than the Federal Reserve or other people think it was going to be. Costs of borrowing are reasonable, both in the public sector as well as in the private sector. The interest rates are just very, very low. Markets are robust. They get tipped every once in a while, but the financial markets are doing okay. I always tell people, though, the financial markets aren't the economy. The economy is the economy. The financial markets are an expectation of future profits based on a variety of things that accumulate to investors. 90% of all investments are held by 10% of the population. So the markets really don't affect most of us. And we have few, if any, recessionary concerns. There just isn't something out there that says a recession is looming or that there's a siren going off, worry, worry, worry. There isn't something out there. If there is, I missed it. I miss a lot of things. Labor force participation weaknesses. Labor force of participation can improve, and that, I believe, wages will pull that up. Larger fractions of the labor force have had stagnant wages. We need some wage inflation. That's my opinion. Inflation is persistently low. Some wage inflation, a little heating up of the economy, a little competition for labor is pretty good. It's good for the economy. I think it's good overall. Increases in the federal funds rate, that's the Federal Reserve, will slow our rate of growth if they keep expanding, increasing the discount rate. We've had a disappointing recovery in manufacturing jobs, notwithstanding all kinds of rhetoric. Those jobs have come back some. They always come back some, but it's kind of flattened out. And we're down still 1.8 million jobs. And policy probably isn't going to affect that rate of change in the near term. Your consumer debt is up and your savings are down. means that we're willing to spend, and we're not hoarding money. During the 2009, 2010, we were saving our money. We weren't spending our money. We were saving it. We were hoarding it because we were afraid. And then, I have this thing. Emerging trade antagonisms are destabilizing markets of late. They're destabilizing a lot of things. And I was asked a question, is this a pre-tariff or a post-tariff presentation? And I don't know. Have they implemented tariffs? But it's a pre-tariff presentation, but we will just have to wait and see. With regard to those tariffs, though, just by the way, it will have a minor impact on the economy overall, but it can have significant impacts on certain segments of the economy. And the degree to which we're exposed to that in Iowa is much higher than the national average. I'll leave you with that. I'm going to look at Iowa's economy right now. Of late, we have ongoing stagnation in the farm economy, high stocks, low prices. We're really, really good in Iowa at producing way too much of everything the rest of the world already has a lot of. And that's what we're doing right now. I'm not going to go over the farm economy unless somebody wants me to, but durable goods manufacturing and employment is down overall in Iowa, although it's recovered a little bit of late. Non-durable goods manufacturing has done a little bit better. It's stable to robust. But you put them both together, manufacturing in Iowa right now, just in the recent months, has climbed back to its highest point since recovery began. We flattened out, then we declined a little, and then we climbed back up. We haven't had the kind of year-over-year income and wage and salary growth that gives me confidence in a lot of things in our economy. Right now, our incomes just aren't growing much here in Iowa. So that's a concern. And that is part of the reason the state's fiscal accounts, the state government's fiscal accounts, are struggling right now. They have misestimated what their returns were going to be. It's a cause of part of the fiscal woes right now. It's only partially a cause of it, but it's a cause of it. We do have a stagnant labor force. I'll finish up towards the end of this with that, more so than the nation. We have more older people in the workforce than the national average. Therefore, we're having more exits from the workforce. And then, of course, we have sharp differences in metro and non-metropolitan growth, and I'm going to talk about that. So here we are. Here's Iowa's recovery. It's pretty persistent. Again, a little bitty herky-jerky once in a while, but for the most part, our economy continues to expand. Pretty good economy. Took a little bit of time for us to go into the recession. We held out a little bit longer than the nation, but we went into the economy. If I index these numbers to a point in time, I'm going to show you the manufacturing first. Here it is. I wanted to show you the manufacturing overall. So that's not me. So here's our economy now. It's just indexed at 2008, January 1, 2008 at 100. So I can show the relative change in our economy during the recession and what happened to manufacturing. Our economy contracted a little over 3% overall. Manufacturing contracted by 15% over that period of time. That's what happens in recessions. We stop making things because nobody's buying. Slowly it recovers. You can see then it tails off around 2014, 2015, tails off, and then it recently has ticked back up. That's the good news right now. That looks good in our economy. And I think I put a slide in real quick to just compare. Yes, I did the same thing. I indexed these values. Here's non-durable goods manufacturing, kind of a steady eddy. You know, it's just we're processing those pigs. We're making the ethanol. A little bit of expansion in recent years. Here's durable products like machinery and fabricated metals and all manner of other things like that. Continuous decline until just recently that's turned back up. So that's good news in the economy. That ought to translate into some better income growth and some future measures. Here we go. I've got this here. I'm going to compare Iowa to the nation. Indexed again at a beginning point so that we're comparing apples with apples. You can see here how Iowa took a little bit longer to go into the recession, recovered a little bit faster. By the middle of about March of 2013, we had recovered all of the jobs we lost. The nation contracted more, took a longer time to recover, didn't recover all of the jobs it lost until about March of 2014. So it was in recession and in contraction longer than the state of Iowa. But what's obvious here is the rate of growth at the national level, as I've already shown, much more robust slope. growing at a much more rapid pace than the state of Iowa. We're growing. We're not growing as fast as the national average. Our high tax neighbor to the north, Minnesota, they're growing at the national average. They're looking quite good right now. And so that makes us look kind of bad. So to make us look better, I always put in our high tax neighbor to the east, Illinois, and we're kicking their butts. We're doing just fine. Okay. Okay, this is what this one is. What I have here is change in Iowa employment by sector, 2008 to 2016. That's the last year I have data from this data set. This is the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And what I have down the axis here are the kinds of industries that are asking for more or less jobs. Okay, and so we're going down the list here. So that's what this shows, and it shows where do we have more or less demand for labor? Which industries are asking for a lot more labor? And the big number up here, well, it's real estate, rental, and leasing. That's almost 15,000 more jobs. Why is it so many? Well, we had a housing crisis. What do people do in response? They built a lot of apartments. Where do they build them? In metropolitan areas. Every apartment or set of apartments needs a manager. Doesn't necessarily pay good, but so you get a lot more jobs in housing-related activities. But we'll skip that one. Next one, 14,600 healthcare and social assistance. Most of that is healthcare. Next one down, professional and scientific and technical services. Snyder, they're in there. 9,900 jobs. Finance and insurance, 8,800 jobs. Educational services, 8,100 jobs. You can see then among this top group, the economy is asking for a lot of jobs in industries that want people with higher educations, college degrees. That's what it's wanting a lot of. What does it not want? 13,500 durable goods jobs shedding, although that's improved lately by 1,000 or so, but it's much less. Information sector, broadly, newspapers, radio, TV, those jobs are down sharply. We have all of these data centers out here in Iowa, great big monsters, great big hot boxes, I call them, right? Those are down. You can see, so you see what the economy, this is what the economy wants less of, this is what the economy wants more of. That's how our economy's changing. That's also how we anticipate this economy continuing to change through the rest of this decade. It's going to continue to want fewer of these kinds of jobs, more of these kinds of jobs. That's the structure of change that's been going on in the state of Iowa over the last decade. Construction jobs, or by the way, I want to point this out, is up. Compared to the nation, we recovered faster. Actually, we exceeded the number of construction jobs in Iowa that we had prior to the Great Recession. During the housing boom, we're still way up. We're still way up. Compared to the nation, it's only recovered about 3/4 of the lost construction jobs. So we're stronger in some sectors in our recovery than the nation. And construction is one of the categories. That 10-cent gas tax helped part of that. Helped part of that. All those windmills helped part of that. That pipeline that went from here to there, that helped part of it, except they're all laid off now. But that's it. All righty, here's the year-over-year personal income. And this is why I'm a little bit bothered by how we're doing in the state of Iowa. This first number is just total personal income. And this is just a moving average of a year-over-year. I take 4 quarters, and then I compare them to the previous 4 quarters, and then every quarter I just keep moving along. So this is the percentage change over this period of time. You can see when we went into the recession, you can also see that we have big swings in total personal income. Total personal income is the money we make from working. It's the money we make from investments, and it's the money we get from transfer payments like Social Security and food stamps and other kinds, and Medicare, those kinds of things. So you can see what that's been doing. And in recent quarters, the moving average has been going down. Now, I'm going to point out here that you don't see a number in recent quarters higher than 4%. Now, I'm going to go to the state of Iowa. Remember the state of Iowa got itself in a little bit of fiscal trouble last year? It didn't quite pull in as much money as it thought it was going to come in. Their forecast assumed 8.5% to 9% growth in personal income. Personal income, income tax receipts. Well, there's no data that indicated that that was going on, and the direction of the data was down. And here's wages and salaries. They were a little bit higher. We had some better recovery there, but you can see that they were also moving down. And I'll maybe get to that, back to that later. So you can see the wild swings. Wages and salaries don't swing so much, but we have these wild swings. That's that darn farm economy that whips things around in Iowa. Metropolitan and non-metropolitan Iowa have had different experiences over the last 16, 17, 18 years, and I'm going to index these starting at 2000. And this just shows the pace of population change in the metropolitan part of Iowa. It has grown by 17% in the last 16 years. All of the rest of Iowa that's non-metropolitan, by the way, metropolitan includes Dallas and Warren counties. It includes all of the counties that are significantly affected by the core metropolitan areas. So they're counted as part of the metropolitan areas. The non-metropolitan areas, this is what it looks like. They've contracted by 5% over this period of time. And it's a steady contraction over that period of time. And I've got the next number. Here's wage and salary jobs. Kind of jobs that most of us do. You can see when we have slowdowns. You can see when the recessions are. You can see that we've still grown by 13% over a 16-year period as measured by that. And then again, the non-metropolitan economy. First of all, it didn't recover during the last recession, not the Great Recession, the one prior to that. It never recovered all of its jobs, contracted much more sharply than the metropolitan economy, and recovered much more slowly. By 2016, it was still at 4% loss. There is the recent estimate that I had said that it maybe in 2017, about halfway through 2017, had recovered all of its jobs. But I'm going to have to wait and see when I get the next quarter's worth of data out if that is the case. I particularly pay attention to micropolitan. We have our metropolitan core economies and the suburban areas that surround them. Generally, they're doing well. Generally, on a comparative basis, they're doing relatively well. Some are doing fantastically well. Then we have the next group of cities. We go out, and they're called micropolitan communities. And a micropolitan community, as designated by the census, has a central urban area of 10,000 up to 49,999. And we have, I don't know, 15 of those out in Iowa. And they're the Mason cities and the Fort Dodges and the Burlington, Muscatine, Keokuk, Clinton, Pella, those kinds of places. And they're important regional economies. They're important central places, and they're important for a much larger area than just that community. They're where people go to work. They're where people go to get services. It's where they go to get entertainment. And they're very, very important anchors to much of the state of Iowa. We also look at the next group of cities down 10,000 down to 5,000. We call them nanopolitans, and they're important too. We have more of them out to the western part of the state. But the micropolitans we've been paying attention to, and you might have noticed that the Des Moines Register did some series on these small, mid-sized cities, how they've struggled. A lot of people want to tie it into the disaffection that white working class people are feeling towards the economy and why they might have voted for Trump and whatnot. But we've been looking at this stuff for a decade here, and we're trying to figure out what's going on in these micropolitan economies. So here I'm looking at county payroll employment, moving average, and it's the same thing that I've been measuring all along. You can see them contracting during the recession. You can see that they recovered, but they didn't recover anywhere near to where they were prior to the recession. And that these 15 or so micropolitan economies, you put them all together, they're starting to lose ground again. There's a weakness in their economies right now that's alarming. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. Both Lisa Leffington and me are trying to figure out what the heck is going on, where it's going on, why it's going on. We're looking at Iowa and all of our neighbors trying to get a handle on this. And it's a problem. This is what it looks like. These are the micropolitan areas in the state of Iowa. This is the average population change for the entire group, contracted 1.4%. These are the three that are growing. Spirit Lake, that's recreation. Boone, Iowa, right next to Ames. It's getting some nice spillover. Muscatine, Iowa, it's getting some spillover from the Quad Cities, plus the Muscatine economy is generally kind of healthy. And coming in at zero is Storm Lake, Iowa. Everybody else is negative. Down at the bottom, what do we see? Clinton, Fort Madison, Keokuk, Fort Dodge, Mason City. They're contracting sharply. And the same thing's going on in their employment. It's contracted. Their economies aren't doing well, and they're losing people. This is an issue. This is something that we're looking at. We don't think the state of Iowa is doing enough. We don't think we're doing enough. But there's only 2 of us studying this at Iowa State University, and we're damn happy to have jobs right now, so we're not going to make a mess. Okay. This is the demographic part of the presentation that I always make sure that I get to, and I explain it very, very well. I'm going to look at, first, let's just do this. I'm going to put the first number up here. Okay, so I have the state of Iowa up here, and what I have is the total population change this decade. Then I have ages 25 to 34, and I have ages 35 to 44. I don't care about anybody else. I care about 25 to 34 and 35 to 44 because this is where the dynamism in the economy exists. This is where productivity growth occurs in the economy. This is what we need when it comes to hiring. The 25 to 34 are the skill acquiring part of the population. We need them. We don't need all of them to be college graduates. We need a range of skills, but we need these people. As they work, as they find their way into the economy, they gain their skills. Their skills go higher. Their skills get higher. Their pay gets higher. Their productivity improves. The returns on labor investment from their employers improves, and our economy expands. The next group of people are 35 to 44. They're the skill applying. For most of us, we knew we had a good idea what we were doing by age 35. And by 44, we thought we were the king of the hill. Ain't nobody smarter. At least that's what I thought. And so we pay attention to these people as well. And these are also people that we consider to be more established, anchored parts of an economy, of a community. They have children. They've got some investments in the economy in the region. They might have a house. So let's look at the metropolitan number. So over this decade, you can see we've had huge growth, well, huge, 6.1% growth in the metropolitan populations. 4.7% growth in that young adult group, 4.4% in that older young adult group. Really good numbers. Now, you're all pretty smart, and you know that if this is this and this is this, these are going to be smaller, aren't they? Large urban, I'm breaking this out. It's not all of the micropolitans. It's the ones that are 20,000 and up. So that's the Fort Dodge, Mason City, Clintons, Ottumwas, places like that. Here's what theirs looks like. Contracted in terms of their overall population, losing that young adult group competitively, but look at what's going on with that next population. Compared to the beginning of the decade, they have 5.2% fewer people. Last decade, this same group, that percentage went down a total of 18%. That is a palpable, tangible loss in human capital and social capital in these communities. You can't tell me they can't see it. Of course they can see it. They know darn well what's going on. And we talk about our youth. Well, I'm looking at these green people. That's the ones that we're paying attention to. Smaller urban, next size down, 2,500 up to 20,000. Same pattern. And then all the rest of Iowa rural that doesn't have a town of 2,500 or more. Those counties are truly Iowa's smallest counties. Again, the same pattern. But here really highlights the stress that those mid-sized cities are going through right now on the demographic side. And then on the labor force side, they say, well, we can't find workers. It's because they left. They left. You know those people that are 35 to 44? They take their kids with them. So this is the decline in the number of youth. 0 to, that's a hard word to say. My cousin Vinny, Utes. You guys know. You guys know. They take their children with them. So you get a loss. You get an echo. You get an echo that 5, 10, 15 years, these people aren't there. They aren't there. So we're getting, of course, we're going to get school consolidations and more rural stress. And there's the rural numbers as well. All righty, so here's the summary of county population change. 73 of our counties have contracted this decade. 26 have gained. Most of the gainers are around metropolitan areas. We got Wayne and Lucas counties down here. I don't know what's going on. Just a few people. This is Metro. Sioux County, I don't try to explain. It's just like, marches to its own drummer. It's up there. It's interesting. But they're also getting some spillover from Sioux Falls growth. And then, of course, we have a little bit of growth, well, strong growth in Dickinson County and a little bit of growth in Buena Vista County, Iowa. And that's the nature of growth. And if I did it on a dot density map, Liesl does this for me every year, this is what it looks like. Every one of those dots is 10 people. Red dot is a loss, blue dot is a gain. And this shows us where the losses are occurring in the state of Iowa and where the gains are occurring and the density of those gains. If you look at the density of those gains, you're going to see Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and the Des Moines Metro are the hot spots in the state's economy, to include Ames. And the rest of the metros really aren't growing that much. Well, they're doing okay up in Dubuque. But they're really not growing that much, but you can see the decline. And you can see also the decline in large fractions and swaths of Illinois. But if you look at this, this is the heart of the Corn Belt. Heart of the Corn Belt. And all of them are suffering with rural population declines. Iowa's labor force is contracting. I wrote a paper about 4 years ago said Iowa's labor force is going to contract. And darned if it didn't. And so it's recovered from the total number of people that are working or looking for work grew, but it's been tailing off. And again, we have more exits of older people right now than we have entrants of young workers coming into the economy or new in-migrants. And the only way we're going to change this in the short run is for Iowa to have more in-migration. Somebody coming to Iowa from someplace else in the United States or from some other country. Because just the nature of our demographics wants this slope to wants us to keep losing population. Takeaways, I've already covered some of this nationally. We've had reasonable, what some might say disappointing. It's as good as we're going to get given the policy tools that they've been willing to enact. Domestic labor force stagnation is one of the things that's hindering our growth. We don't have bad behaving sectors. The financial sectors aren't as bad as they used to be, and most conventional economic indicators are positive. Iowa, we're growing slower than the rest of the nation. Iowa really can't grow faster than the rest of the nation because we need the rest of the nation to buy what we make. We don't need anything. We're a producer. So it's the rest of the world and the rest of the nation's demand that drives our economy. Ag and manufacturing's dominance in the economy constrain the state's capacity to grow. Those are slow-growing industries, and they're important in the state. And so as part of our portfolio of economic activity, they hold down our rate of growth. We have strong, I've already shown, geographic differences in growth rates across the state, and our acute labor force, our labor force concerns are more acute than the national average. We're actually contracting. And I put this slide in because I've had to deal with it lately with a lot of people. Liesl and I, my research partner, we've done a lot of research on Iowa's labor force, the nature and the character of labor force demand, and back to labor supply. And a lot of folks will go out and they say, you know what we have? We have a skills gap in Iowa. We have a skills gap. Well, no, we don't. We don't have a. We're really good at educating people in Iowa. We're really, really good. We really stand out at educating people in Iowa. A skills gap means we forgot to teach them something. We just, oh my God, we forgot to teach you this. Well, we didn't do that. What we have are labor shortages, locational labor shortages in several parts of the state of Iowa and to a degree in parts of the state as well. But if I look at these numbers, Iowa does not have a skills shortage regarding educational attainment. Number 1 nationally in high school graduation rate, 4th nationally in 9th grade through college completion rate. If I put a a dot on a kid and follow that kid all the way through college, we rank number 4th nationally on the probability that that kid will go from 9th grade all the way through college. If we start something, we finish. We do a pretty good job. 2nd in the nation in the percentage of 18 and 24-year-olds enrolled in college. 5th in the nation in college completion rates within 6 years. Those were all my kids, 6 years. 11th nationally in the population with associate's degrees or higher. We have a competitive advantage both in the production of educated people as well as the retention of much of those educated people. But remember back about my economy, how it's configured? We can only use so much of them. Our economy only demands so much new talent each year. And so the rest of it has to go find work someplace else. They don't leave because we don't love them. They leave because we can't use them. And that's the biggest issue going on with regard to that. So I have a few more things on this. Yes, net exchange, we send out more young skilled workers. We actually attract a lot of young, lower skilled workers. Absence of labor in rural areas is not a skills shortage per se. It's a labor supply shortage, period. They're just not there. So now what you have is this demand-supply mismatch. And is it easy to put people back out into rural areas? No, it's hard. They're going the other way. Mao tried to do that in China. That didn't even work. Okay? It's very, very hard. And oh, by the way, there isn't a housing shortage in rural areas. The people are leaving. There's a lot of housing supply. So building new houses isn't going to bring people to rural areas. You've got it backwards. Payroll, paychecks buy houses. The problem in rural areas is an absence of paychecks to buy new houses. Okay. I don't have much time here. 9 minutes. Right? Okay. Few comments on government finances. I was struggling. I already told you about sluggish income tax growth. Ongoing and new tax expenditures created the bulk of the problems that we've had at the state government with funding public services. And then there was a botched revenue forecast, and I don't care who knows. It's botched. It was bad. They all should be spanked. It's a bad forecast. Local governments are more of a mixed bag. We have good, strong growth in several of our, especially metropolitan areas. They're adding valuation. We have a relatively good clip. Their own source revenue growth is growing relatively well, although lots of it's abated and tiffed. But many non-growth areas, especially in the non-metropolitan areas, are struggling. The fuel tax has helped a lot, took some stress both off cities and counties and to a degree of the state. And again, it boosted that construction employment. I'm going to do a different thing here. I'm going to put this up here. Real quick. This is property tax collections, just who's paying the property taxes. This is residential over time. This is the proportion of property taxes paid by homeowners. You can see it's been growing, and you can see the farm fraction. It's been going down. It's going down quite nice. We've grown homeowners like me, we're about 55%. Farmers, not like me, are paying about 15%. And then we have all the commercial activities and industries. We put them all together. I put commercial and industrial together. They're the ones, that's this group. They grew for a while as a fraction of the total, and then they started to go down and down and down. And about this time, we passed a property tax break for them to give them even a faster rate of decline. So that should happen. And then here's everything else. Here's everything else. And by the way, industrial is 5% of the total. Manufacturing is just 5% of the total. It's not a very big fraction. Most of this is traditional commercial. So I'm going to show you that. And then number 2, I have some fiscal indicators. I can calculate these. I do it often or when I help group people try to understand what's going on in cities. And so I calculate this thing called the property tax capacity and effort indicator. And capacity is just basically is your per capita valuation relative to some group average. And so I have a group average here of the metropolitan area. So I'm doing this just to show you who maybe has some stress and who doesn't have stress. Effort is your property taxes per capita taking into account your capacity. Okay? And so if your capacity is 75% and your taxes are about 75% of the group average, then you would be at 100% effort. You see what I'm getting at here? So I have this number here, and I put this up, and I've got my metros. And so we can look at our various cities here. Here I have, on both ends, I have two different communities. I have Council Bluffs, and I have Ames, both of us at close to 100% of capacity of the group average. That's our capacity, our ability to generate property taxes. Waterloo is lower. Des Moines is lower. Why would Des Moines be lower? Why would you say all those state government buildings? But this is the amount of money that's available for the general fund. They also do a lot of property tax abatements and TIFs and those kinds of things. It's lower. Sioux City is lower than Des Moines. High, West Des Moines. West, look at them. Geez, they got everything. Everything. Ankeny, really good. So then the next number I'm going to put up is the effort. How much of your capacity are you using on a comparative basis? And you can see Council Bluffs, it's using all of its capacity and more. Same thing with Waterloo. Same thing with Des Moines. I generally think that a city that's at 115 or higher is a city exhibiting a lot of fiscal stress. A lot of fiscal stress. A little bit lower than that, Sioux City is high. They're lower capacity, but higher effort, but not extremely high effort. Here's West Des Moines, very high capacity, comparatively low effort. And then us over in Ames, which we like to call heaven. Average capacity, but relatively low effort. Well, we also have a lot of public goods in Ames that the city doesn't like. Our garbage service is private, and there are different things that we have that we don't spend money on in Ames. So it's that. So that's a fiscal indicator, and I do this for different sizes of cities. I've got it here. Come on up. For the suburban cities, same thing. I'll put this up here. I've got the suburban cities by valuation. It's sorted by valuation, how much valuation they have per capita. So you have a relatively high valuation in Windsor Heights, but their effort is high. Their effort is high. Well, one of the problems we have in Windsor Heights is that it's mostly residential. So they have very, very high. Same thing with Norwalk, mostly residential. They don't have a very diversified tax base. These are ones that I would consider in the metropolitan areas to be stressed to a certain degree. And then these are ones that are less stressed depending on your point of view. But so I did these capacity and effort indicators, and we need to get done by 1. Well, I'm okay. I don't want to do anything on TIF. There's the next group of cities down. I'll do that. I don't want to pick on TIF. Let's pick on TIF. These are our cities that are heavily leveraged by using a lot of TIF. We have Des Moines. Oh, there's Coralville, still number 2. It's always the bad boy on TIF. I like to pick on them. This is the fraction of their tax base that's sequestered into TIF, 42%. Altoona, 35%. LeClaire over on the east, almost 60%. Huxley, where's Huxley here? It's here. Yeah, I got it. 53% just to the north here. It's got as much in TIF as Grimes and Iowa City. Oh my. Anyway, so you can see we have a lot of cities that are somewhat more judicious users of TIF. I'd say Des Moines is more judicious. West Des Moines is more judicious. Even Sioux City and Ankeny. And then you have a lot of places that are really aggressive with their use of TIF. I argue that the cities that are doing a lot of TIF are oftentimes under fiscal stress because they've constrained their tax base. They've shifted the obligations to fund general fund activity to the non-TIF property owners. So it is creating, the argument is short-term stress, long-term gain. When do you think Des Moines is ever going to let go some of those TIF districts? They're perpetual, but we'll see. What else do I have here? Quick. Oh, questions and concerns. If you want a copy of this, see my email? I'll send it to you. I'd be happy to send you a copy of that. And I kind of ran through that last part fast, but if you have any questions, I'm willing to take them. And then if we have to wrap everything up, I'll also take questions afterwards if you want to chat or talk. Any questions? No? Yes. Yes, it has. It's a good thing. 43 of our counties peaked their population in 1910. 2/3 of the counties peaked in 1950. So yes, we've been contracting. So acting like rural development and rural decline is a new thing seems a little bit silly. But the thing that I'm worried about is those mid-sized cities. We've always had this contraction of the rural space because fewer people are required to do rural activities like farming. But the loss in prominence and vitality of those mid-sized cities is still worrisome because there's no reason, theoretically, that they can't be strong, stable cities. And that's a problem that we're worried about. Yes, we're cross-subsidizing rural Iowa quite a lot. Yes, you are. Yeah, the formula doesn't change. That puppy's in the Constitution. You try and change that. They ain't going anywhere. Yeah. Yeah, they're going to protect the rural areas for as long as they can do that. You're always going to get a decade lag in political power, at least a decade's lag in terms of relative power. And then you have weird stuff that happened this last time, and so now it's topsy-turvy. But yeah, that's an issue, especially with regard to rural services. We are increasingly obliged, not required, obliged to subsidize rural services because we have a lot of people in rural areas that need access to healthcare, to subsidize basic transportation, need social services, need a range of things. We don't just walk away like maybe Mississippi does. You know, we're Iowa. And so we try to figure out ways to cross-subsidize and to assist. Yes?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what a $1 billion tax cut would mean for the economy as well as.
Sure. My opinion. Kansas.
I know you don't.
Kansas. Okay, folks. Okay, here's the economy. It's all the production that we have in the economy by the private sector, plus the production of the public sector. It's part of the economy. And the argument that you can make the economy better by making the public sector smaller has some merit if the public sector is so large, it's interfering with the private sector. But if you make the public sector so small, it's no longer able to support, provide human capital, provide the essential infrastructure needs, those types of things, then your economy starts to contract. And that's where you get the supply side fallacy. And you get a Kansas or Louisiana. These are places that have been train wrecks over the last decade because either by neglect or intention, neglect Louisiana, intention Kansas, they constrained their public sector severely and it hurt their private sector. Supply side economics, from all the evidence that we have, basically comes down to an easy bottom line summary. For every dollar in tax revenue you cut under supply side rhetoric, you only get back 20 cents. You don't get back $1.20, you get back 20 cents. So you're losing 80 cents worth of public goods or capacity to public goods. So my argument is, if the public sector is too big, make it smaller. But don't make it so small it hurts the private sector. $1 billion out of Iowa's public sector is going to do two things. It's going to constrain the economy and it's going to hurt the most vulnerable people in the state of Iowa. And those two things I think are unconscionable. How's that for an objective? Yes?
You talked about the botching the budget.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, that's a political thing. I don't like to promote economists, but it's an internal process between management, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is, I think, an open and reasonable organization, and then maybe some people over in the Department of Revenue. It used to be we had an external group out of the University of Iowa, provided a consensus forecast about the economy, and then based on that consensus forecast about the economy, then they made revenue projections for the state of Iowa. It's an opaque and closed process right now. I do not know the risks to the forecast. I don't know the elements to the forecast. And all I do is I get periodically 3 people get together and one guy says, well, that farm economy bothers me. Well, it's not the farm economy. It's more complicated than that. So we need a new revenue estimating process. And that includes hiring some sort of disinterested external group to maybe provide some of the input into this process as opposed to it being internal. Because I think internal also means that you can control that information and or manipulate it to one end or to another. And both sides are guilty of manipulating those numbers. I'm not pointing fingers just at one. Both sides are guilty. That's for fairness. All righty, yes, one more. Yeah, it is. We're going. I'm the median baby boomer. I'm the halfway point. To me, they put it on my head when I was born. I'm halfway. Born in 1955. I'm out of here in 4 years, and a lot of us are out of here in 4 years. And there's going to be a swell, and then it's going to tail off, and that's at least 10 years worth of stress, and that's going to limit our ability to grow. And so, what do we need? If you've got to have labor, you've got to have in-migration. And if we're going to make babies, that's going to take 20 years. So that ain't going to work. So we got to have in-migration for both our national and the state economy to grow. And we got a lot of competition. You know, a lot of people. We're relatively slow growing. We're not growing as slow as we did last decade, thankfully, but we're still a relatively slow growing state.
A couple comments on your current work on the troubling trends for those macroeconomic. When will you tell us how to fix that?
Yeah, it's going to be a how-to book. You'll have to go through it one chapter at a time. The work we're doing on the mid-sized cities, and we're doing stuff on the housing, is stuff that we're trying to get done this summer, and we're going to try to really rush it through. Not rush the research, but rush it so that we can get it into both in journals and into publication, because other kinds of publication, because we think there's an incredible demand in the Midwest for good research on that topic, because it's not just Iowa, it's all of our neighbors. And to include going over into the eastern Midwest, all the way over to West Virginia, that we need to really pay attention to that topic. So that's where we are.
Anything else? Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.